In Pokemon Red, you play as Red, and if you're playing Pokemon Blue, you're also Red, because that's the canon. You follow Red's quest to become a Pokemon Master by catching all 151 Pokemon, gathering all 8 gym badges, and finally beating the Elite Four in the Pokemon League. Pokemon Red and Blue are entry-level RPGs with an emphasis on monster catching and raising. You're always given a starter of your choice between Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur. From there, you have to build up your roster. You need to buy Pokeballs, get into encounters with random Pokemon, weaken them, and then catch them using a Pokeball. After you catch a Pokemon, you can use it as a member of your party, and if you raise it enough, learn new techniques or evolve it into a stronger form. The reason for catching Pokemon is for all the various trainers you encounter while running around the Kanto region. Every single one of them has a bone to pick with you. The collecting aspect is fun and exciting. When a rare Pokemon encounter happens, it definitely gets you pumped up to make sure you don't mess up catching it. It feels great to get a new addition to your team, especially when it's a type you really needed, like Electric, Fire, or Ground. That being said, catching all 151 Pokemon is definitely not necessary. In fact, you only really need a party of 6 diverse Pokemon to actually get through quite easily. Any Pokemon of the same type as one already in your party usually has no place and spends the rest of its life in Bill's PC storage system. Pokemon is a game of hard counters. Pokemon all have types, and there are a few smaller element wheels. There's the standard water beats fire beats grass, which beats water, but also things like electric beats ground, which is beaten by flying, or water, which is beaten by electric. The system works pretty well, but what it mostly means is that you're going to be abusing elemental weaknesses whenever possible. This often results in defeating opponents in 1 or 2 attacks, or on the flip side of that, being beaten in 1 or 2 attacks. There is a good amount of customization in Pokemon. You get to choose the 6 Pokemon for your party, and you have the ability to learn 4 unique moves per Pokemon. The limitation of only 4 moves per Pokemon can be bittersweet. It makes it really simple and accessible, but since you have to erase a move to learn a new one, and you don't necessarily know what the new one does, it can mean you remove a decent skill from your roster and replace it with something that's potentially really bad. HM moves cannot be deleted, so once they're on a Pokemon, they're on there for good. Being on the Game Boy, there are a lot of limitations because of the hardware. Graphically, it's very bland. The Pokemon battle sprites are stoic, and there is a lot of overlap between special moves. Things like character limits create problems. For instance, TMs, the technical machines that teach your Pokemon moves, are numbered, such as TM02 or TM15. You have no idea what move they teach at a glance when they're sitting in your inventory. Even when you boot up the TM, it doesn't actually tell you what the move does, just the name. This applies to the HMs as well. The HMs are really annoying to use. Cutting down bushes with cut once is fine, but the issue with that is once a bush has been cut down, it respawns after you leave the area. There's really no reason for this, besides forcing you to have a cut-capable Pokemon in your party at all times. It's a bit of a meme, but the idea of an HM slave, a Pokemon that exists solely to use your HM moves, is kind of true. To actually use HM moves, it requires going into your party menu. You need to use Cut, Surf, and Strength regularly, so being forced into your menu to do something really basic gets tedious quite quickly. Inventory space is also severely limited. You'll be constantly putting key items into the storage via the PC once you're done with them, or you'll have to suffer with an even smaller inventory. The music is really nothing to write home about. You'll be hearing the same tracks a lot, which does actually get quite grating. Finally, to take note of a unique feature of the Pokemon games, the ability to trade and battle your Pokemon with friends. This requires a link cable, and there are some limitations of this. Your end goal of Pokemon is to beat the Elite Four with a complete Pokedex by owning all 151 Pokemon. To do this solo is impossible. You need at least a copy of Red and Blue, as there are exclusive Pokemon as well as some preparation and clever use of trades to get all 151. You can do some clever shuffling on Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue to get you and your brother access to all 3 starters, which makes you feel really clever when you're 9 years old. This was a cool and novel thing back in 1998. It's less cool now as it becomes a chore to actually get all 151 Pokemon, and honestly, Pokemon is so easy that you'll only need to catch about 10 Pokemon throughout your adventure. Pokemon is definitely on the easy side. It is targeted towards children after all, and as such, there are virtually no punishments for dying. If you lose a battle, you'll simply respawn at the last Pokemon Center you rested at with no penalty to EXP gains or money. When you combine this with the fact that you can save anywhere, it makes it a really easy game. Difficulty is mostly related to how you're leveling up your party and its composition. Certain types are more plentiful in Gen 1, such as water. Fire types are much more scarce, and they're quite useful for a handful of gyms. The starter you pick will determine difficulty throughout most of the game. Charmander has the hardest start, as the first gym and areas like Mount Moon are rock-based, and fire is ineffective against rock types. In the mid-game though, fire is quite strong against Koga and Erica. Squirtle starts off being strong or neutral, but has a few lulls in the mid-game such as against Lieutenant Surge and Erica. Bulbasaur is by far the easiest starter, as it's strong or neutral against everything in the early and mid-game. It only has issues against Blaine, but there are so many water Pokemon that it's a non-issue. One of the best parts about Pokemon is the cure is usually near the poison. There is usually a Pokemon around the gym's area that can be a strong type against the gym. In Cerulean City, and against Misty, there's a few grass-type Pokemon around, either Oddish or Bellsprout depending on your version. When you get to Vermilion City and have to fight Lieutenant Surge, you have the Diglett Cave right beside it. This provides a disgustingly easy solution to Lieutenant Surge's electric Pokemon. In Cinnabar Island, if by some miracle you don't already have one, there are dozens of water Pokemon around to trash Blaine's fire types. All that being said, you can get through Pokemon with a core few, and realistically, just one or two with smart leveling. The enemy's AI is terrible. Enemies will constantly buff their Pokemon to the point where it's likely you win some battles without taking any damage as they continually raise their defense. The difficulty of most of the battles is more related to your opponents using attacks that confuse, sleep, or paralyze your Pokemon. These aren't necessarily threatening, they more just make you groan as your Pokemon sheepishly hit themselves or do nothing until they finally get the attack off that one hit kills the opponent. If you're using Pokemon that are weak versus the type you're up against, then you're gonna have a bad time. The only issue with difficulty is that if you rush to the Elite Four and skip all the optional content, your Pokemon will be underleveled, which means you'll have to do a bit of grinding to get your Pokemon into competitive shape. Pokemon Red and Blue are actually very slow paced. This comes from there being a lot of run around, a high random encounter rate, and slow battles. Skipping most of the optional content, Pokemon Red was completed in 11 hours, 56 minutes, and 27 seconds. Playtime, especially for a first playthrough, will be significantly longer due to trial and error and not knowing exactly what to do or where to go. You will need Pokemon capable of using the HM moves: Flash, Cut, Surf, and Strength. If you're playing Red version and you picked Squirtle, and depending on what other Pokemon you caught, you may have to do some backtracking for a Pokemon capable of using Cut. This is really frustrating because it forces you to go hunt down something like an Oddish, which most likely will only exist in your party strictly to use Cut. But if you chose either of the other starters or raised something like a Beedrill or caught a Sandshrew in Blue version, you won't have to backtrack at all. There is a lot of runaround in Pokemon Red and Blue. If you don't necessarily know exactly where to go, you can end up going the wrong way and having to backtrack. If, for instance, you skipped Diglett's Cave and didn't get Flash, which requires catching at least 10 Pokemon and talking to Professor Oak's aide, and instead went directly to the Rock Tunnel, you'll need to backtrack to get Flash since there's no way you're getting through the Rock Tunnel without it. Oh, and to use Flash, you need an electric Pokemon, just for that extra little annoyance factor. Eventually, you get some really useful abilities like Fly, which significantly reduces your backtracking. Fly lets you get to any major city instantly, which is just fantastic. In dungeons and in tall grass, the encounter rate feels disturbingly high. You can get chain encounters only a handful of steps apart. It makes navigating any kind of dungeon area an absolute slog. You can use repel items to prevent encounters, but without them, you'll be grinding through a lot of incredibly easy and monotonous random battles. Maps are definitely recommended as it can be difficult to navigate many of the dungeons. All areas in a dungeon look the same, and a large number of them have gimmicks like moving tiles or holes to fall in. In conjunction with the relatively small screen size of the Game Boy, it can be difficult to get the big picture for these puzzle sections, which leads to getting turned around and lost. There is a good amount of optional content in Pokemon Red and Blue. There are some hidden things you can find that are going to be really useful, like the bike. The hidden legendary bird Pokemon and Mewtwo can be fun to find and catch. It does take a long time to do everything in Pokemon Red and Blue, and it's not really necessary, especially since no one really plays Gen 1 anymore. Pokemon is an entry-level RPG targeted towards children, but has fun collecting and monster raising components. Battles are largely spreadsheet fights where it's more about stats and exploitation of weaknesses rather than strategy. The weaknesses are easy to understand and the concept of battles is quick to grasp. Pokemon's adventure is fun, but that being said, it's rough around the edges. Areas can be confusing to navigate and it's hard to see everything due to the small Game Boy screen size. The high random encounter rate and frequency of trainer battles makes area traversal an absolute chore. Its slow pace means you'll need to be in the right mindset to actually enjoy playing it. Pokemon Red and Blue started a phenomenon. Pokemon is a household name now, and as such, it's important to see the starting points of the series. Even if you only make it as far as the second or third gym, it's worth experiencing Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon Red and Blue get recommended playing's most historic verdict of recommended because of cultural significance.